I think that we still have 3 minutes, I think.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. That's why I said.
Oh, yeah. All right. Sorry, I wasn't having a go at you yet.
Yeah, yet.
Yeah.
That's coming. He's never had a go at me. He's been very kind. No.
Sounds like you're kind of, you feel deprived?
No, I can live without that.
All right, because as I said, kind of,
We're not good friends enough yet.
as I said, I came in with it in a tirade, so it can always be
Oh, okay.
external.
You can externalize your tirade.
So what about the prayer thing during the weekend?
Yeah.
Are there evening sessions?
There could be some evening ones. I'll have a look.
I think they have some in the morning.
Yeah, and Sunday I know you're out.
No, actually, kind of. So it moved to,
Oh,
it moved to Saturday.
you moved to Saturday. Then it's not Father's Day on Saturday.
Don't get me started.
Oh, Danny Gillis.
But that's not why I have an inner tirade. So
Yep. Hey, look, I wasn't even going there.
Yeah.
You're in a tirade, I've forgotten about it. Until we get to April. So, okay, so you're looking at evenings on, well, obviously only Saturday. I'll have a look and see.
we can start with the Heart Sutra, I reckon, right?
Yeah.
Good choice.
Thank you. Thanks, Graham. I feel empowered now. Totally empowered.
I prostrate to the Arya Triple thus did I hear at one time that Baba once rolling on Master Roger's mountain.
Together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya overlooked this world, looked upon the very practice of found perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should go upon like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic. Unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition, factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and soul, not to including no man element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging and death, no extension of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on dwelling perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed with the reaching end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell 3 times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Sharif Murti the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the fine perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan rose from that concentration, commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Devatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shad Bhariputra Bodhisattva Mahasattva. And those surrounding in the entirety along with the world of gods, humans, suras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly, the accumulations that I collect by practicing generosity, may I become a Buddha. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, and the highest assembly. I gather by proxy and generosity, back in the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. The accumulations that I gather through proxy and generosity. May I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Righto. So, I have quite a few things that I prepared for today, sort of speaking about today. Let's begin with a secondary offense. Let's speaking about a secondary offense. And then we'll continue with the material that we've covered yesterday and today. So we've looked at the secondary offenses that correspond to the first 4 perfections, right? So let's look at a group of secondary offenses that are incompatible with the perfection of absorption, the 5th one. So the first one is quite easy. If you want to place the mind in equilibrium, meaning that equilibrium is one of the terms that is used for in the context of absorption or the development of samadhi. So if you want to place your mind in equilibrium or samadhi, but out of bitterness or laziness, you do not go to others to receive personal instructions on absorption. It is a secondary offense of not seeking the meaning of absorption. I think that is quite straightforward. If we try to just explain it in our own words, it would be, if you want to develop concentration, but you don't seek instructions, you just do kind of guess in your meditation what it is, or you have kind of a subset of instructions, kind of just a limited set of instruction, and think that that would be enough for me, and now I want to develop concentration. It is, and you might do it because of laziness, or here it says also due to bitterness, in the sense that you might could be upset about something. What you could be bitter about is not very clearly stated in this set of instructions, but I guess if we can think of certain situations, like for example, maybe you could say that there are instructions that are given, but kind of you don't feel like hanging out with other people. You don't like the people in the group, so kind of you don't go to receive instructions because of disliking those people. Maybe it's like that. Or maybe you think that if I go and receive instructions on absorption, I'll get some other instructions. I don't want to get other instructions. No, I just want to meditate on concentration. I mean, this is kind of probably impinging on laziness. Yeah.
Bitterness is hard to know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I looked at a couple of other commentaries, and nothing was really said about why would you what would be the motivation of being bitter about receiving instructions for absorption? Anyway, it seems that kind of
You got instructions before, and then you wouldn't go for more if you were bitter about those instructions. You would seek it out.
Maybe it's just one of those translation things.
Could be.
I don't know what I mean by that, but I know in my head what I mean.
Yeah, could be.
You
Maybe you don't need to worry about.
Yeah, you know, just
Yeah.
one of those things.
My version says the transgression is not to do this because of, for number 24, because of laziness, evil intent, arrogance, or meditating on samadhi without having received proper instruction.
Yeah, so so it says that, thanks, Graham. So it says that laziness, and another thing is arrogance, thinking that kind of you have everything under your control, but also one of them was malice or ill will, which is connected, I guess, with bitterness. So,
Evil intent, I suppose, is analysis.
Yeah, it could be connected with the intent on wanting to develop absorption. I think that probably if you take it, you consider it within the framework of practicing the 6 perfections. Having taken the Bodhisattva vow, no, in general, your motivation should be such that you're seeking to benefit others. So you want to develop absorption. It's actually interesting because in Natisha's Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment, it says, when he explains why you would develop absorption, it says that in order to benefit others, you need clairvoyance. Without absorption, without shamatha, you cannot develop clairvoyance. So this is part of his pitch for developing.
But also we need it for the perceptual realization of emptiness.
Yeah, definitely. Now, which is kind of, I just wanted to bring it up because this is like an unusual explanation that Atisha gives, because the usual explanation is that without calm abiding, without absorption, there's no way that you can develop a perceptual realization of emptiness. There's no way that you can develop insight, special insight. So from a Mahayana perspective, you want to develop absorption so that you can have a perceptual realization of emptiness, as you said, Sharab, but also in order to develop clairvoyance to be able to be of benefit to others. Like, for example, to know other sentient beings' minds, so that you could be of benefit to them in a better way. So you might be lazy in receiving instructions, or some ill will involved with that, kind of disliking someone in the group, disliking a teacher. I mean, I don't know.
It might also be that it's more related to the laziness, though. It's like, how often do I have to keep doing this and getting this instruction? Like, because it is a tough path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to read into
Yeah.
this bitterness.
I mean, it's interesting. I think that the development of concentration, and particularly calm abiding, is a contemporary popular topic. So we have weekend courses in different places for shamatha. But then I think that the instructions that are given are quite limited, in the sense that to really be able to get the whole scope of shamatha, what are the prerequisites? What do you need to understand in order to understand what the prerequisites are? Like, for example, what is the meaning of having greater contentment and lesser desire? What is the meaning of having pure ethics? Those 3 things are part of a subset of prerequisites for the development of calm abiding. Then, the system of the 5 folds, the 8 antidotes, the 9 stages of mental placement, the 4 engagements, or those different 4 attentions, sorry, not engagements, 4 attentions that you develop throughout that. It's quite complicated. There's like a great scope of concentration, and you might be thinking that it's too much. Just want to develop concentration, just want to develop absorption. So you set off and do it by yourself, which I think that maybe if you're lucky, you can go to a certain extent and develop a greater level of concentration. But if your aim is to develop calm abiding, you need the whole package. not only the whole package of knowledge, but you also need to know that you need enough merit for calm abiding. You need to remove certain degrees of obscurations. So you need to take care of quite a lot of areas. So having a partial approach due to being lazy or being arrogant. No, and we normally say that that arrogance or pride is what prevents you from developing good qualities. In a sense that when you think that you already have good qualities, when you have this lofty state of mind, when you're arrogant, you can't see your own shortcomings, and therefore you can't recognize your blind sides. These good qualities will wash away from you. So that's the secondary offense here. I think that's quite straightforward. Any questions? Okay, so let's look at where we are in the text. So today Geshe-la started with the way to train in the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. That's the third type of ethics. But before that, we've finished today being knowledgeable about performing actions of the three doors: how to act when speaking, how to act when viewing, connecting oneself solely with virtuous karma. Yesterday, we spoke of giving to the special fields of giving. We spoke about always giving, the motivation for giving, special fields of giving, those with great qualities, those that benefit you, like your parents, those that are in need. Then it says virtuous karma occur through its own power. Let's just briefly look at this verse, remind ourselves what it means. I should always perform actions endowed with skill and joy. In all actions, I should not depend upon anyone else. So there are a couple of points that are made here. First of all, you should be learned. You should be knowledgeable about performing virtuous actions, which is also, if you remember, when we looked at the previous section that explains the antidotes, we spoke about it also yesterday. In relation to the first type of ethics, ethics of restraint, guarding against deterioration in the training of the mind was essentially developing those 9 attitudes: being certain about the Dharma, being faithful, not allowing external circumstances to interfere with your practice, being respectful, and so forth. So Khenpo Kumpal, in his commentary, says that first of all, you develop knowledge. You become kind of, you develop the knowledge of what you need to do at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And based upon your knowledge, then you become certain about the Dharma. You become resolute. You become faithful. You develop respect. You have a sense of shame. So the emphasis is that you do it on the basis, first of all, having studied, then contemplated, then contemplated what you have studied. So whatever we do, we want to do it in an informed way, not just to be told by others what to do, but to develop our own inner knowledge, which is, I think, that part of this is one of the benefits of spending such a long time together. All of us studying a text such as this. So we spend a lot of time, we go into a lot of details. We also get engaged in other teachings, Lama Tsongkhapa's presentations of the steps of the path of enlightenment. Later on, we'll study some other presentations. So you build up your knowledge to the point in which you don't need to ask others what to do. You know for yourself what you need to practice. So first of all, you become learned. Then through becoming learned, you have faith. And the type of faith that Geshe-la mentioned is an informed faith. An informed faith is that which is born from knowledge. So the definition of faith, and I think that it came up, maybe it came up in one of the previous sessions, either here in the BP or maybe the general teachings, or maybe in other set of teachings that I participated in. I can't remember that.
That last week.
Was it last week?
Oh, well, that, I was thinking probably when we're going through the 9 attitudes.
But in faith in general, when we describe faith in general, we said that faith is seeing the good qualities in something, right? So when you're able to recognize the good qualities of something, it is faith. But there are different types of faith. There is faith of clarity, when you kind of see that, when you see the good qualities of an object that has those good qualities, like, for example, the qualities of the 3 objects of refuge, the qualities of a spiritual teacher. See, not only you see those good qualities, I mean, it's not just kind of having the knowledge of those good qualities. I think that it's also becoming inspired by those good qualities and thereby having that deep sense of trust in those qualities. So trust is not normally described in relation to what is that clear faith, but I think that if you're able not only to recognize those qualities, but to understand what they are in the biggest, having the big picture, then also it brings about that kind of deep sense of trust. You rely upon either the 3 jewels, the teacher, and so forth. That's one type of faith. Another type of faith is trusting faith. Like, for example, trusting faith in understanding the mechanism of karma, the way that certain actions, causes, produce their own effects, the results. Then we also have wishing faith, which means faith when you see kind of the certain good qualities in a particular thing or a particular state, and you don't have wishing faith, wishing to obtain that yourself. So Shannon is saying there was an emphasis that the object of faith was necessarily virtuous. Well, faith is a virtuous mental factor. So within the 11 virtuous mental factor, just in Man's mental factor, faith is the first mental factor in that list. So I agree with you, Shannon. Kind of, it's necessary when we speak about faith, at least in the Buddhist tradition, we speak about faith in something that is virtuous. I mean, when we speak of something that is endowed with good qualities, the good qualities, I think, are understood in a Buddhist context, right? So I guess that you can have faith in other things in a loose way. But then when you discuss faith in a Buddhist context, it's particularly a virtuous thing, something that has good qualities.
That's what I was just going to say.
All right. So then if you have the knowledge and if you have faith, you don't need others to encourage you to do something. You know yourself what you need to do, which I think that this is where we want to be. Now we have, like, for example, what is nice about centers like the FPMT centers or other centers as well is that we have things like guided meditation. So how to meditate is taught to us by others. But when you look at the Gelug tradition, this is totally uncommon. Like in the monasteries, for example, it's actually hardly done that people sit for a guided meditation. It is more done in other Tibetan Buddhist tradition, like, for example, it's more common, I think, in the Kagyu, maybe also the Nyingma. But in the Gelug system, it is not common, and it's also, I think, not encouraged. The emphasis is on academic study to begin with. So I'm mentioning that because you get a taste of meditation. Then you build your knowledge to the point in which you don't need those guided meditations anymore. You know yourself what to do. You don't need the encouragement of others. You don't need to listen to others' instructions. You build your own procedure for meditation. But in order to do that, it's important, first of all, to get the backbone. Like, for example, you meditate on death and impermanence, right? So you need to know the structure, the 3 points, the 3 roots, the 9 reasons, the 3 conclusions. You might have someone that drills with you a few times to meditation on death and impermanence. But then once you have the knowledge and also faith, you can do it yourself. You don't need others to tell you what to think, what to imagine, what to visualize. And also you can take the time that suits you. So it's good also to try it out yourself. So that's verse 82. Then let's look at quickly at verse 83 that comes out of the heading of entering into higher and higher virtues and having examined whether there is a purpose acting upon it. Verse 83. It says, the perfections such as generosity are progressively more exalted. But for a little, I should not forsake something greater. Principally, I should consider the welfare of others. So there are a few instructions here. First of all, the perfections such as generosity are progressively more exalted. So what I wanted to do is to quickly look at Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemo that gives some more explanation. Let's look at just again. All right. I'll share it with you. So in his Lamrim Chemo, in the section of chapter 8, training in the Mahayana precepts and perfections, just towards the end of the chapter, he has an ancillary discussion of the fixed order of the perfections where he speaks of the order of arising, the order in terms of inferior and superior, and in the order in terms of subtle, which is what Gary mentioned, but also in previous sessions. So I think that we can quickly go through that, just briefly read through that, because it provides us with more information. So when you have generosity that is disinterested in and unattached to resources, you take up ethical discipline, the second perfection. When you have ethical discipline which restrains you from wrongdoings, you become patient with those who harm you. When we're going to look at patience, we have three types of patience. One of them is patience that disregard harm that was done to you. So if you have practiced ethics before, in which you have restrained your mind from harm and the basis of that harm, then even when others harm you, you do not retaliate in harming them back, right? This is why ethics comes before patience. When you have the patience wherein you do not become dispirited with hardships, right? You willingly accept sufferings. That's the second type of patience. And also you have patience of certitude about the Dhamma. The conditions for rejecting virtue are few, so you are able to persevere joyously. That's the fourth perfection. Once you joyously persevere day and night, you will produce the meditative concentration that facilitates the application of your attention to virtuous objects of meditation. Right? So you'll have enough joyous effort to persist with absorption, which is quite hard to cultivate. And then when your mind is in meditative equipoise, you will know reality exactly, which is what Sherab was getting at. Calm abiding or absorption is necessary for a perceptual realization of reality. So then that's the order of the perfections as they arise. Now, on top of that, actually, no, let's read through the next section and then I'll add a couple of more details. It says, each preceding perfection is inferior to the superior one that follows it, which means ethics is superior to generosity. Patience is superior to both ethics and giving, generosity, and so forth. The order in terms of coarse and subtle. Each preceding perfection is easier than the subsequent one to engage in and perform, so it is coarser than the subsequent one. Its subsequent perfection is more difficult than the preceding one to engage in and perform, so it is more subtle than the preceding one. So that's Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation. Now, in some of those, at least in the last couple of points that he spoke about, superior and inferior, let's say, superior and lesser, and subtle and coarse, he just stated it as a matter of fact, but I think that we probably still need to think about it in terms of, it says that.
Okay, I found this on the web for inferior, superior, and someone crossed it over in fact, but think about it in terms of check it out.
Thank you. Siri just gave me an advice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Siri.
Siri's on the ball.
Yeah. I'm being patient with you, Siri.
That's so cool.
So
Oh, God.
that was so cute. I mean, it seems that, for example, Joyce's effort seems to be, like they say, that it is something that requires little effort and gives you, and you can accrue a great accumulation of merit through Joyce's effort, right? So it says with little effort. But still, it is fourth in line, which means that it is more subtle than patience, ethics, and generosity. It's harder to practice Joyce's effort. It is superior to ethics, generosity, and patience.
I guess you're also looking at the more subtle in terms of where your focus is external versus internal.
Mm.
So, you're going more from generosity and ethics, predominantly externally focused, patience on the transition thing, and then more and more dealing with the mind.
Mm. Yeah, maybe that could be one thing. What I wanted to add to that, so when you look at Chandrakirti's supplement to the middle way, what it does, it looks at Lama Tsongkhapa, it looks at Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise of the middle way, the root of wisdom. And in the supplement to the middle way, it gives a commentary to that. But what he does is he looks at the 10 Bodhisattva bhumis, the 10 grounds, and each one of the ground is paired up with a perfection. So the first ground is paired up with generosity. The second ground is paired up with ethics. The third ground with patience. The fourth with Joyce's effort. The fifth with absorption. The sixth with wisdom. Then we have ground 7, 8, 9, and 10, and they also paired up with exalted wisdom, skill in means, and aspiration prayers. All of them are branches actually of wisdom. But when I said that on those 10 Bodhisattva bhumis, 10 Bodhisattva grounds, they're paired up with each of the perfections, the 10 perfections. 10 perfections are extension of the 6th perfection. Then on the first ground, you attend the higher practice of the perfection of generosity. On the second ground, you attend the higher practice of the perfection of ethics. On the third ground, you attend the higher practice of the perfection of patience. On the fourth ground, you attend the higher practice of the perfection of Joyce's effort, and so forth. Which means that when you think of the order of arising, we have Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation that explains how each one of the perfection initially supports the one that comes next. But you can also say that looking at the Bodhisattva grounds, the higher practice of each one of the perfections comes on the basis of having attained the higher practice of the previous perfection.
And I think that fits with also the explanation that they become more exalted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and that fits with this example, this idea that they become more exalted, but also more subtle. So Shannon says, Geshe Upton from the Teacher Center asserts that ethical discipline comes before generosity, as we require discipline to practice generosity and the rest. I guess that we would have to have a conversation with him to get at what is, to understand the big scope of what he's talking about. But maybe I agree that we do need ethical discipline to practice generosity and so forth, particularly because of the points that I also wanted to bring up today with respect to when to give and when not to give. So that requires certain forms of ethical discipline, but also together with that, we mentioned the practice of each one of the perfections, the 6 perfections within the 6 perfections. So you have within generosity, ethics of generosity.
I was just also, what was I thinking? But if we're looking at the sequence of the perfection of each of those, not necessarily that you have to have the ethics to practice the generosity, so then it's not contradictory.
I On your, you know, the chart, the Great Beautiful Path
Yeah.
to the list, on there in the grounds, generosity comes before the ethics.
Yeah.
Generosity is on the first ground, ethics is on the second.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So the higher practice of the perfection of generosity is attained on the first ground. The higher practice of the perfection of ethics is attained on the second ground. So, you know, so that in Chandrakirti's explanation, there are also, you know, there are those attributes or qualifications that explain what is the higher practice. Like, for example, you know, when you attend the high practice of the perfection of ethics, for example, you're not sullied by the stains of the lack of ethics, even in your dreams. So let alone when you're awake, you have no taints in no problems with your ethics. Even in your sleep, your ethic, even in your dreams, your ethics is completely pure. All right. Another thing that I wanted to include in that explanation is, let's look at Kempo Kumpel's presentation. So in relation to that, let's read through that. Since the transcendental perfection of generosity, discipline, and the other perfections become progressively from the lower to the higher more important, that is to say, more exalted, one must mainly practice the higher ones. For instance, just as the water in the hoof print and the water in the great ocean differ, the benefit of keeping discipline for a single day is greater than giving donation for 100 years. I thought that this is actually quite, sorry?
That's from the ornament.
That's from the ornament. So I thought that that's quite, yeah, that's quite a nice statement. Thus, the perfections become progressively more exalted. Then Sutra Alamkara, which is the ornament to the Mahayana Sutra, presents the six perfections through distinctions such as relying on the former practice to the latter, and classifications into lower and higher, refined and gross. Then the next section says, do not abandon a superior or greater, meaning a higher perfection such as discipline, for instance, for the sake of a lesser or a minor perfection such as generosity. In general, it is stated thus. However, in particular, one must bear in mind that bodhisattvas primarily consider whatever brings the greatest welfare for other sentient beings and practice accordingly. Which means that, in general, although the latter perfections are exalted, they are superior to the lower perfections, you still need a few considerations in place. You need to consider, here it says kind of nicely, you need to consider basically what's beneficial for others. But I think that also for us, if we apply it on a personal level for us, we also need to think of what's beneficial for us in a current level of development. No. Although you could say that the perfection of absorption is more exalted than ethical discipline, without practicing ethical discipline to begin with, there's no way that we could practice absorption. Without practicing the previous branches, there's no way that we can develop the wisdom of emptiness. So although the latter ones are superior to others, to the earlier ones, still from the point of view of personal progress, we also need to make sure that first of all, we create a stable foundation in terms of generosity, ethics, patience, just as Lama Tsongkhapa explained in his Lamrim Chemo, the order of their rising.
We had a slight discussion about this in the discussion, but not at all as clear as that. But in terms of, as you said, the bodhisattvas might, using according to the needs. So, for example, when our teachers, like Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa were known to, I think particularly Lama Yeshe would cook up a storm for people, and then, you're hooked in for the Dharma to get the teaching, so to get the higher level based on using their earlier ones.
Actually, it's good that you mentioned that. I'm wondering if people at home hear Chuki. Anyway, no, tough luck. Not really. So Chuki was saying that it is like, for example, the lamas or Lama Yeshe has sometimes cooked a stone for people, to lure them in and then give them teachings. So Olaf is saying the word transcendental in front of each perfection is interesting. Well, transcendental is another translation of the word perfection. So it's just a different translation. So in relation to what Chuki has just said with respect to Lama Yeshe cooking stone and so forth, this is where I wanted to link it up with the next section. So let's look at the next section in the outline, which is the way to train in the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. So we have verse 84, devoting oneself to the welfare of others, then conduct that gathers others without sullying or polluting oneself with wrongdoing. So material generosity. But then when you look at this outline, does it remind you of anything the point that we made a week or two ago with respect to the practices of bodhisattvas, what bodhisattvas need to practice? So, all right, I think I'm being vague. So we have, yeah, so we have the practice, bodhisattvas practice the 6 perfections in order to tame the own mind, and the 4 ways of gathering to tame the minds of other sentient beings, right? So the 4 ways of gathering. In English, we sometimes call it the 4 ways of gathering disciples. Tibetan, it's the 4 ways of gathering, but I think there is the same meaning. So the first way of gathering is being generous. Like you care for the needs, the material needs of your students. And it is said that if you provide them with what they need, if they need material support, if they need food, if they need accommodation, you provide them with that. Then you speak pleasantly to them. I guess that pleasantly means probably not always it needs to be kind of in a cuddly manner. Sometimes kind of you might have to talk to them skillfully and kind of in a way that may be more wrathful, but you speak to them pleasantly in a sense that in a way that corresponds to their particular disposition. Then you also need to work at their aims, which means that you need to give them teachings that will establish their own aims. But you also need to have, the 4th one is you need to have a consistent practice, which means that whatever you teach to others, you need to have practiced it yourself. You need also to abide by the same ethical discipline. After all, if you don't discipline yourself, you'll not be able to discipline others, right? So those are the 4 ways of gathering. So looking again, just looking at the outline. So we have devoting oneself to the welfare of others. You could say that in some sense it is maybe related a little bit to the 3rd way of gathering disciples. This is coming under the section of the way to train in the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. So you devote yourself to the welfare of others. You establish others in the aims of the teaching, the intention of the teaching. You gather others without sullying oneself with wrongdoing. So you gather others through material generosity. Then you gather others through the Dhamma. So just looking at the outline, we haven't looked at those verses yet. Physical postures which are inappropriate for listeners. Examining the features of the vessel's thoughts. One should not treat a person who esteems the extensive like one who feels an affinity towards the inferior. So we will look at that later on, but basically you need to know how to teach others what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and so forth. And then looking after the minds of sentient beings and training in the conduct that is unsullied by wrongdoings, then, the way to act when the path and so forth are being sought, the way to lie down and so forth. You basically how to conduct yourself in a way that helps to care for disciples. So it doesn't follow strictly the 4 ways of gathering disciples, in the sense that it doesn't say this is point 1, this is point 2, this is point 3, and this is point 4. But I thought of just looking at the 4 ways of gathering disciples and how here we practice ethical discipline that is ethics in working for the sake of others. You can see how the 4 ways of gathering disciples, parts of it is included within that ethical discipline. So, any questions so far? All right, let's then look at what we've covered today. So, devoting oneself to the welfare of others. Let's quickly look at this verse. When these are well understood, I should always strive for the welfare of others. The far-seeing, compassionate ones have allowed those that were forbidden. So I think that we've spoken about it not only today, but also previously when we spoke about distinguishing between permitted actions and prohibited actions, and when we are permitted to do things that are prohibited. So I think that it's kind of repeating the same point. So the fasting compassionate ones have allowed those that were forbidden. Geshe offered 2 interpretations for this section, which also accords with what we have in Geshe Dhamma Rinpoche's commentary. So you can say that, first of all, the Buddhas, the far-seeing compassionate ones, have allowed for Bodhisattvas to go on and do the 7 types of actions that are generally prohibited in certain situations. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation that he offered was that when you have generated great compassion, you are permitted to do it. So those 2 interpretations are not different. It's not, in a sense, that they're not negating each other. You can actually combine them together. You can combine those 2 interpretations together in saying that, first of all, we have permission from the Buddha, or from the Buddhas in general, to act in this way. But you can act in this way when you're motivated by compassion. As Geshe said, and I paraphrase what he said, no, we don't become half-handed or partial with allowing ourselves to engage in one of the 7 actions of body and speech just because we feel like doing that and we find justification in the teachings. It's more like when we're genuinely motivated by compassion, then you can do that. But to be genuinely motivated by compassion, first of all, you need to know what compassion is. You need to make sure that your compassion is untainted, impartial. And also, you need to really deeply look inside and ask yourself whether you're willing to take upon yourself the consequences of a negative action, that you yourself are willing to bear the suffering that are related to negative actions, if it's done in order to protect others. So sometimes we have a kind of an intellectual or academic discussion about whether it is allowed in this situation, in other situations. But I think that most of the time we can really try to look inside and check whether we do act based on a compassionate attitude, and whether we have full understanding and full trust in the working of karma, and we are willing to take upon ourselves suffering, even sometimes great suffering, in order to protect others.
It's hard to think of some of the actions being permissible, like the sexual misconduct. How could that, I mean, I just can't think of a situation where sexual misconduct would be permissible.
Yeah.
But I am not a great bodhisattva, so therefore I have no idea. But, you know,
Yeah.
you could say some and not others, some are clear, some not so clear. No.
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think that, with sexual misconduct, I guess that when you look at the list of things that are included within sexual misconduct, then you can maybe look at things that are said to be secondary. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's hard to think of scenarios. Sorry?
I say it's not a dilemma I have to deal with, but just trying to get a sense of it.
So Kate says, in the counseling field, in crisis work, there often are circumstances when it is harmful to be transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also, I guess that in, also from a Buddhist perspective, not always, no, we want to be honest with others, but being honest with others is not always the right way to go forward. Like, I remember that, when both of my parents had passed away quite a few years ago, but when, and they passed away at different times, and they were non-Buddhist, they were not interested in spirituality, they were afraid of death. So, enforcing my Buddhist views on them about death and impermanence, about karma, was not the right way to move forward, So, we did speak about death sometimes, but, I think kind of telling them, inevitably everyone dies and blah, 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 was not the right thing. Being completely honest about it was not the right thing. I remember my dad used to say things like, I don't need you to come to my funeral in order to elicit a certain response. And I used to think, well, you're not going to be there anyway. What do you care? You're not going to be aware of that anyway. So what do you care? But it's not always skillful to be transparent about it. Anyway, so let's look at the next section, which is conduct that gathers others without sullying oneself with wrongdoing. So gathering through material generosity is the first thing that is mentioned. So gathering through Dharma, we can consider that also generosity of giving the Dharma, although within the 4 ways of gathering, the first one is referred to taking care of the necessities of students in terms of money, food, shelter, clothing, providing them with those immediate necessities in order to make sure that they have whatever they need in order to apply the mind to the Dharma. So, the difference between giving and not giving food and clothing. Then we have not causing harm to the body for the sake of minor actions, and explaining the time and need for practicing the giving of body. So there are a few points that are covered by those 3 verses. We've covered, I think, verse 85, and we didn't cover verse 86, have we? Did we? We touched upon it just. But I wanted to mention that because it opens the door to a massive discussion that Lama Tsongkhapa nicely explains in the Lamrim Chemo. So in the Lamrim Chemo, it basically creates this outline. Put it in front of you just quickly. What am I looking for? This? No, I'm looking for. No, I'm looking for this. Thanks. Well, you're great. So, Lama Tsongkhapa, when he explains the perfection of generosity, he speaks of what to give, or what not to give. So he explains that in terms of inner things and outer things, when it would be inappropriate giving from the viewpoint of time, inappropriate giving from the viewpoint of purpose, and from the viewpoint of one who asks for something. And with respect to other things, inappropriate giving from the viewpoint of time, the gift, the person, material things, and purpose. So here we have only like 3 verses that Shantideva mentions, but in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemo, there is a really nice discussion. So just to cover some of these points that we've covered today. So let's just look at the verse. In verse 85, it says, I should divide my food amongst those who have fallen into error, those without protection, and those abiding in modes of conduct, and eat merely what is suitable for myself. Except for the 3 robes, I may give away all.
So we're about to mention this pages up.
Yeah, so is that okay? Yeah, but this is what I wanted to. All right, so with respect to how to give and how not to give, in the section in Lamrim Chama of how not to give, it first of all makes a list of how not to give. So cast aside these 13 ways of giving because they are to be eliminated. So not giving right away, but only after you have delayed. Now, so if someone asks you to give something, give it straight away rather than hoarding it. Giving under stress, this is also something that you should eliminate. Giving after you have involved yourself in affairs that are called neither with the teachings nor with the ways of the world. Making a commitment beforehand that I will give this much and later making gift of reduced quantity or amount. This is actually sometimes it is said that once you've committed yourself to giving something, which means that in your mind you think, I'm giving it away. If you then come to the place in which you need to give something physically and you hold back, is tantamount to stealing, because once you have giving it away in your mind, you had the intention to give, it's considered to be already giving. It's very harsh, isn't it? I mean, sometimes when you think of, I guess, what can happen to us, I mean, what happens to me, what happened to me before was that, now you think of those kind of, you think that, no, if I get to India, for example, and meet such and such Lama, I will make offering, I will offer this much to them. Then later on, a few weeks after or a few months after, you meet that Lama and you think that actually maybe that was like too much. I can give half of it and that will still be okay. Right? So in your mind, you already made that commitment. You already had the intention to give, and then you go back on that. So that's also to be eliminated. So giving in return for favors. Giving in installments when you could give all at once. As a ruler, giving away someone else's child or spouse that you have kidnapped. I guess it's not going to happen to us, or likely not. Taking through pressure the belonging of your parents, servants, and so forth, and giving them to others. Making gifts by methods that will hurt someone else, while you remain idle, employing someone else to do the giving. So with positive actions, with virtuous actions, it is said that if you have the ability to do it yourself, you should do it. If you have the ability to do it yourself and you employ others to do your bidding, you get less merit. So you should do it yourself. You should give yourself. You should also rid yourself of giving while you criticize and have contempt for one who asks for something, while you are indirectly critical in a way that implies contempt, or while you intimidate the recipient with harsh words. Yeah, quite a few things. I think that what happens sometimes, in the way that I relate to this point is that sometimes when you're in India, for example, in a place where you have a lot of beggars and they hassle you to a degree that you just want them to go away, then it's easy to just kind of give them a note, as kind of a small denomination, and kind of with the wish like, go away. I think that's probably the spirit of this thing. So giving while you violate the Buddha's precepts and not giving resources as you require them, but giving them after you accumulate them for a long time. But actually, this is not what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at another section, which is this detailed explanation of things which are and not to be given. So Lama Tsongkhapa says that once you understand how not to give anything, you will know the opposite of what to give or how to give. So for example, inappropriate giving from the viewpoint of time, it says right from the start, Bodhisattvas give away to all living beings, the bodies, etc., with complete sincerity. Nevertheless, though you may be asked, do not give away flesh of your body and so forth until you have developed an attitude of great compassion. Then you will not despair at the hardship of being asked for such things. So I just wanted to bring it up as an example of what Lama Tsongkhapa said in Chemo and connected with what here Shantideva says. So he will speak about not causing harm to the body for the sake of minor actions, explaining the time and need for practicing the giving of body. So Shantideva does refer to that, but if you want to get a greater explanation, greater context, the section of Lama Tsongkhapa's text is invaluable. Anyway, I wanted to maybe pull out more points from this section, but it seems that we're out of time. So unless you have questions, we can just leave it here for now. Questions, doubts? Thank you.
Thanks, Carson.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Carson.
See you tomorrow.
So, well, let's do the dedication. I'll just slot it in quickly. So may I quickly become Guru, Lord Buddha, and teach and lead each and every sentient being to his enlightened ground because of these merits. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta, which is not arisen, arise and grow. And may that which is arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All residents in Gaza, please remain with this samsara. You uphold the subduous moral way, who serve as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading much enough victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace and love.